Hey guys, so today we're going to dive into your relationship with food, making sure we're taking into account those key emotional triggers, those cravings, those urges, and making sure that we can really stay on track, sustainable, and most importantly, we can enjoy it. Okay, so we're going to go through some really simple frameworks that you can install today to make sure that this makes it so much more enjoyable and simple for you moving forward long term. So I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you watch right to the end and hope you get a ton out of it. Your relationship with food. I think it's a really, really important part of improving our health overall, really looking at how we enjoy this process rather than feel like it's something that we continue to suffer with. So there's going to be a little bit of question here. I want to make sure that anyone that's involved in today's call, if you can just say hi below, let me know that you're watching either live or replay. Really be really, really good to see who's actually on the call. We can really dive into things today and get an idea of how we can really help, how we can really help with your next steps. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be diving into your relationship with food, really understanding how it's such a core aspect of making sure we look at the approach to nutrition being the flawed aspect for most people, rather than necessarily the exact foods that we're looking at, right? So if we can look really big picture for a second, we're going to really be able to hopefully change your whole trajectory of consuming food. So before we dive into things, I'm going to give this back to you. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and get an idea of if you are watching this, if you are listening, take a second to actually ask yourself these questions, right? So food. What does food do for you, right? For you, what is food, right? Is it more social? Is it more fueling? What is that, right? What does food do for you? Okay. Next part here is in what areas of life is causing stress right now? This is going to be separate to food, but get an idea of right now, where is stress coming up in your life? Okay. Hopefully you've got those first two. Now, third, how do you eat when you're stressed? So now we're getting an idea of how we put maybe these two together, right? Are we now taking an emotional approach to how we eat food? Are we looking at this approach of, yes, we are trying to cover our feelings in some way when we're stressed, angry, sad, whatever it might be, and realize that we're starting to place an unhealthy role on food. Okay, so maybe an example here is food is comfort, right? What areas of life is causing stress? Maybe it's work, right? How do we eat when we're stressed? Well, now maybe when we get home on that Wednesday and Friday night, we're now ordering pizzas because we can't find a way to deal with that stress in a more healthy way. Okay, so describe your connection to guilt and shame. We've talked about this a lot with our private coaching clients, and they've found it really, really helpful. And I think it's one of the biggest aspects that we look at from a mindset aspect to really make sure that nobody's falling off, right? A lot of people worry about falling off around week 3, 4, 5 into a nutrition plan. And I think guilt is a huge aspect of it. So ask yourself, when you're following a certain nutrition path and you're trying to make these changes for a better lifestyle, energy, body composition, whatever it might be, how do you hold on to that guilt when you slip, when you make a change, when you go out for dinner and you don't have those options that you're looking for, when you have that splurge with some friends? How do you approach that feeling of shame or guilt afterwards? Is that something that's a thing? Is it something that you notice comes up? And then the next part here is, what do you want to release over the next 2 weeks? What do you want to, what happens to your nutrition, your training, your approach in general after that event, that thing, that time where you ate something out of that schedule, right? And some of you right now, you know what that feels like, right? I'll start next Monday. I'll have to start on the start of the month. I've got these things on. And you start to delay and push these things out because you had that one slip, right? That one thing that really fell off. So what can we shift here, right? And the analogy, a quote that's become quite prevalent inside of our coaching community is never miss twice, right? It always matters about getting back on as quickly as possible. And that's an aspect that I'll dive into with you today, is just getting an ability to shift that focus around emotions, around how you approach food in being able to build things back up. Okay, so what would that look like for you if we started to look at food in a different way, we started to understand fueling our body, not starving our body, and looking at improving our relationship with food, what would that do for you in your life and your approach to your body and enjoying and respecting your own body and those occasions that food are involved, right? That's a pretty huge aspect. And I think this is where we start to get a little bit deeper into understanding what a massive role food plays in our lives and starting to look at that relationship being a key cornerstone in us actually looking, feeling, performing at a high level, shifting that mindset. Okay. So hopefully you've gone through and given yourself some answers there, right? So those questions again is, what is food for you? What areas of life are causing stress, and how do we eat when you're stressed? Okay. What's that association to guilt and shame when you do slip, when something goes off? And then how long does it take for you to get back on track when you have had that slip up, right? These are the huge cornerstones and a lot of the mindset stuff behind how we coach clients, because no nutrition plan is going to be helpful unless it's something you can follow, it's something you enjoy, and it's something you can get back onto when there is those adjustments, right? Or making sure that you actually reapproach how you think of a slip, right? We think about, rather than on and off the wagon, it's getting back on your circle, right? Getting back on, because it's a continual process to keep things moving. So really, really powerful stuff. So to give you my insight into food, right, getting an idea of maybe some of those shifts that we really reinforce a lot of the time is getting that ability to think about food as fuel, as enjoyment, as nourishment, as time with the family, as guilt-free, right? Making those and rewriting some of these thought processes, these stories that you have with food that quite frankly is self-sabotaging your ability to move forward, right? Your ability to think about food in a healthy way that you actually enjoy without that guilt, without that resentment, that resistance, I guess, in being able to enjoy food. And guys, this is really, really powerful when we look at this awareness of how much our brain and our thought process around eating actually plays a huge role in what we absorb, right? So you've heard me say this 100 times, it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. It's this understanding of how much of a role our brain plays in our ability to digest and utilize the food we're actually eating. Okay, so if you are eating a meal and you're in this guilt and this stress about what you're eating and what have I done, or I shouldn't have eaten that, and I'm worried about that for another couple of hours, or worse, I'm dragging this out until next Monday because I'm already off, I might as well stay off, right? That's a really poor mentality to get into. But like I said, it's going to actually shift how your body uses that food. You'll start to store it a lot more as body fat rather than actually being able to use that, because there's that stress response coming through. Whereas if we really start to make sure that it's decision, regardless of how good the food is, we enjoy it, we are present with what we eat, and we focus on that, there's a huge shift in our digestive ability of those foods, even if it isn't so, quote unquote, healthy food, right? So this awareness of how we approach food, both before we eat or after eating, and that relationship with food in itself has an immense ability to change your ability to digest, assimilate, absorb that food properly. Okay, really, really powerful. Hope you're staying with me, guys. I hope that's helpful. So to dive into that, that was a funky little aspect. I didn't know I had a little animation on there. So the big shift here, guys, is that ditching the diet mentality. I think by now, hopefully that's giving you a bit of a focus point, is going from all these black and white terms, right, of good, bad, unhealthy, yummy, sugary, fattening, toxic, cheat day, binge, free calories, right? Really, really poor relationship with food, to really being able to move right over into understanding maybe a little more mechanism behind food, right? There's fast food, and there's nutrients, and then there's nourishing, there's maybe things to avoid, there's macros, calories, that sort of thing, right? And if we really get into a good relationship with food, it becomes very simple, right? There's things we eat less because it feels good, and there's things we eat more because we feel great, right? If we get to that point, we're working and we're listening to our body and how we actually feel. And if we start to understand what that base looks like, how we structure foods, how we build out your blueprint, right? I'm really not a fan, I'm sure you know this, of locking you into a particular diet, whether that's vegetarian, keto, paleo, whatever, right? I want to find out what Ollie's nutrition looks like, or what Nicole's nutrition looks like, or what Steve's nutrition looks like, and really getting that base and understanding of, okay, this is how you feel great. These are the foods you feel great on, and these are the times of day you should be eating, or the amount of meals you should be having, or whatever that might be. And now we've got a really, really good base to build that back up. Okay. So it's simply that shift in focusing on how you approach food, how you think about what you're eating, and then being able to have a better relationship there. Okay. So this dives a little bit into, as I said, this is that gut-brain connection. That's that awareness of this pleasure center, right? Whether that be more of looking for that dopamine response, or whether that be more a serotonin, okay? And getting an idea of a simple adjustment, right? Both of these have some level of happiness involved, but one's very addictive and short term versus one which is much more slow releasing and not so addictive, right? So serotonin is the one that we're really focusing on, and you've hopefully seen a lot of the articles, a lot of the posts that I've put up around this awareness of happiness versus fulfillment, right? The short-term chase of happiness versus the long-term feeling of fulfillment, right? It's not as high, it's not as intense, but it's this fulfillment aspect that builds forward, right? So it's this long-term contentment, as I've written here. So when we start to really seek serotonin, right, this calm, fulfillment, long-term happiness there, we're looking at regulating our mood, our appetite, digestion, memory, sleep, sexual function. It's really going to apply directly into a lot of our hormones as well, right? Because through our pituitary gland, that's actually secreting a lot of our luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone for males specifically, females as well, but specifically here with males, it's going to be inhibiting or helping a lot of that testosterone function as well when we're really chasing a bit more of that serotonin base. Now, where is 90% of the serotonin based? In your gut, right? So 70% of your immune system's in your gut, 90% of your serotonin is in your gut. So really being able to look at this digestive base, both realizing that the two are connected, both need each other to really be healthy. Both your relationship with food and how you think about food is going to affect digestion, and then having a healthy bacteria base, making sure that there's you're modulating that level of inflammation and toxicity in the body, that's also going to improve or inhibit that brain function. So they really do work through that vagus nerve and communicate with each other very much together, okay? Whereas if we're focused on this dopamine response, right, this is tends to have a certain motivation, but what is it really towards, right? This is the addictive mentality, whether that's toward drugs, sex, food, jumping off, hills with bungee jumps, whatever it might be. Like, that's an addictive mentality. It's very, very short term, right? And I always use the example of, unfortunately, a lot of these very high paid actors or singers or whatever it might be, is they've got such an immense amount of adrenaline rush, singing in front of thousands upon thousands of people. So when they go back into their hotel room or a normal day-to-day life, they always feel empty, right? And this is where there's a lot of drug addictions and stuff coming through, whereas they're always chasing that same dopamine response. And I think a lot of people can understand that base, but think about how that's becoming an everyday thing for you with looking at your phone, whether that be likes or shares or videos or having to have that short-term fix with sugar or coffee. It's seeking that dopamine response, and it's immensely detrimental to every aspect of your life, not necessarily just your gut. But realizing that in itself is a huge place to start, right? The only diet I'm a fan of is the dopamine diet, and being able to make that shift towards long-term sustainable happiness fulfillment rather than the short-term pleasure center and focusing on short-term spikes, okay? And this really dives into another one of those big neurotransmitters being GABA, which if you have any issues with sleep, this is a massive aspect as well, which is going to tie a lot into seeking serotonin over dopamine, as we can actually get a lot more release of that GABA and make sure we're in more of a calm state, more cool, calm, collected, okay? Whereas if you're in dopamine, there's going to be a real stress base locked to that, right? It's definitely going to be in the way of digestion and all these other things as well, all right? So where does that really come up? And, if I put these photos up for you, you'll probably start to feel that your mouth is salivating just looking at all the colors and flavors and the associated signals and responses and flavors that you remember from these foods, right? Whether that be the big greasy cheeseburger, whether that be the sweet and sour lollies or whatever it might be, is these foods are chemically engineered, right? This is food science at its highest, being able to simply find a way into that pleasure center. And we dived really deep into this with our clients the other day, is understanding this response to the body, this constant seeking of certain nutrients. And this dives a lot into this awareness of what they're looking for. And what it's called is postingestive feedback, right? It's this concept of looking for certain nutrients. And our body naturally is supposed to be quite good at knowing, okay, well, if I eat this berry, I know I'm going to get a little bit of copper and magnesium and these certain nutrients that my body needs. So if I, in the wild, back in the day, got low on certain nutrients, then there'd be certain cravings for these sort of foods to go find them, right? The problem is in today's society, the food science and the general system there has found a way to hack that, find those dopamine pleasure centers and actually rewrite how our body thinks of certain flavors, right? So rather than seeking the berry, we're now seeking the sweet and sour lolly, right? Rather than seeking the berry, we're seeking the dark chocolate or the normal chocolate, right? And we're starting to see these cravings come through because deeper down, a lot of the time cravings are coming through from a lack of certain nutrients. The problem is the desire of a certain food becomes skewed by how this food science has really come through, right? So realizing that a lot of this comes back to the same base that I've talked about all the time, which is society is chronically undernourished, which means is they're chronically overeating to try fill that base. But with the foods that we're eating, we're realizing that there's really no nutritional value there, and we continue to overeat, right? So realizing that's a really, really big base to how we build forward, how we get an awareness of nutrition and rewriting what our body really seeks, right? So the emotional aspect of this awareness of how we change our relationship to food, it really has to start with, one, this awareness of on and off a wagon. We need to get rid of that mentality entirely and looking at a sliding scale of, is this helpful? Is this not? How can I get back on circle? How can I keep chipping away and moving forward? What's that first domino, right? And make sure that it's not tomorrow that starts or Monday or next month. It's, okay, well, that was unhelpful. I don't feel as good as I should. So how am I going to add in a bit more on my next meal and get some water in, a nice salad, whatever it is, to simply fuel that body, get things back on track. Being mindful of emotional eating and this awareness of not seeking food to fill a hole that's come up from an emotional base, right? Having an external way to please ourselves is a really, really unhealthy mentality to get into, and it has been ingrained into us as a child for most of us, because what happened when we were upset, right? We were given an iPad, or we were given, well, the kids of today were given an iPad. Back then it was we were given some food, or we're taking McDonald's or whatever it might be there, and that's been ingrained into that base. So we need to find a way to really turn inward, and this is a lot of the mentality around mindfulness, breathing, meditation, walking, whatever it might be, to find that way to shift your focus on how we deal with emotions and not seeking food as that first base, right? The next one here is ditch that diet mentality. Diets are not made to fit you. They're blasted out to the masses to try fit people into categories that they simply don't fit into. And that microbiome, that base, that body that we're working with at a cellular level is not going to be the same as anyone else in history, right? So to work with the individual and to find out what you really feel good with and what you're fueled on best is going to be the approach that you should really take forward, right? And that we really approach all of our training, all of our coaching with is identifying initial frameworks for sure that we can start to build forward, but trying to understand that as we work through with a client, we find the foods you feel best on, right? The fourth one here is simply make it easier on yourself. Make sure that you're focusing on that simple first step. How do I get a nice base of awareness of how do I feel on this food? Is it helpful? Is it not? Start there, right? Stop trying to find a way to add in the new superfood or the new fat burner or whatever it might be. And if you need some help, get that in your corner, right? Allowing us to really look under the hood and find out what that base is with experts that have actually done that before is much better than asking your mate what they eat, right? Really not very helpful. And we're trying to work with the individual. And then the last one here is simply identify the pain, the craving, the symptom that you're trying to fill and actually approach that, right? Especially New Zealand, Australia, males especially, we're not very good at diving into that and asking ourselves, how are we feeling? What's going on? Are we feeling stressed, overwhelmed, under-recovered, underslept? And how can we look at improving that as a base and optimizing the body as a whole and realizing that eating more food or adding in 10 more coffees is not a way to fill that hole. if we start to look at refueling our body, looking at how we can heal or nourish that body, we're in so much of a better place to actually fuel and show up as our best, right? So this awareness of emotion, this awareness of relationship with how you approach food, very much just comes back to you. And this awareness of looking at food in a way that is simply a fueling process. Is it helpful? Is it not? Is it something that's moving me forward, or is it moving me back? Is it making me feel good? Is it not? All right. And if I have that, if that's something I'm working with, now we're in a really, really good spot. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that today, guys. That is an aspect that I'm really, really passionate about, and something that hopefully you can see we talk about a lot with our clients, because the big goal here is never a 6-week quick fix. Then what's the next thing to move on? It's empowering you with understanding, what should I be eating? How does that look for me as an individual? And starting to really build that path out. Okay. If that's something you're stuck with, if that's something you want to dive deeper into, be more than happy to get on a call with you, with our team, at least, to dive in, really isolate what those obstacles are, and really start to build out that game plan, or just start to create some clarity, get rid of the noise and understand what that really looks like for you, rather than trying to fit you into another box of what a diet looks like. All right. Hope you had a great week. I hope that was insightful and something that can spin around in the back of your mind there, and maybe make some shifts in how you approach your next meal, your next program, whatever that might be. Yeah, that's me. I hope you had a great Thursday. Hope that was helpful. See you later.